Joined now by the Executive Director of the Transformation Resource Centre, Tsikoane Peshoane. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let's just start with the work that you do in this area for our viewers to understand, and then we can talk about the current situation.
Good evening, Metsepiso and the viewers. The TRC is one of the organizations that were entrusted by the Independent Electoral Commission to run the electoral education ahead of the elections. Subsequently, during the election, we also had a joint venture with other civil society organizations in the country to observe the process of election management and how it has unfolded. So mainly these are things that we have been doing. We have been close to the process until the last day as it stands.
And
yes, I think that's the first thing I wanted to make.
Oh yeah, that's the first, so you can continue to the next one.
Yes, so, I think as you have also realized that the electoral process, of course, it has been smooth because we have not observed incidences of violence or irregularities in a sense that one will, or in a way that they can construed as some kind of a election rigging. There are no such incidences. What one can also highlight is that the Independent Electoral Commission has performed a little better than it has performed in the previous elections. In a sense that because this time around they had the resources to run these elections, and they have managed to make sure that all the equipment and necessary materials that are required for elections were collected and were put in many places, were available at the time that we expected. So this is what we looked at. And the process itself, in terms of the training of the voters, was done quite smoothly. And we don't have incidences where we can say a number of votes are spoiled due to the fact that the voters did not understand what are their responsibilities and how are the steps that they're supposed to follow. So these are just small indicators that I'll just say. Elections were quite smooth in terms of their management and in terms of their compliance with the SABC principles of election management. So as far as the principles are concerned, I think they were quite fair, and we will say we don't see any complaints that are actually undermining the credibility of election. But at the same time, I think I must also indicate that we are not very much comfortable with the voter turnout. Of course, there are isolated incidences where the voters were complained about the voters' roll, where the voters, you'll find that their names were not necessarily found at the police stations where they expected that they are going to vote at that stations. So these are some of the incidents which were a bit worrying, but we cannot necessarily say there were so many that we can come to the conclusion that the election were not necessarily properly managed as it should be expected.
So I wanted to actually ask you about...
Of course, they put a stay.
I wanted to ask you about that, particularly the voters' role and concentrating on the youth. You also reflected on the challenges faced in the last elections, how all of this will then influence what happens, particularly in the voter turnout. You say the problem with the voters' role are not so significant that they could influence it, but do you particularly see that as being a threat amongst the youth?
Generally, it's a piece of our voters' role is a problem. We have actually went to the national elections last year in October. Already having a problem with the voters' roll. We have a voters' roll that we cannot rectify and remove some of the names of the deceased, for example. So you will understand that the statistics that we have is not quite reliable, that we can basically say this is the data that we can work on. That is a problem we have. Our voters database is also not connected with the national database, which it is basically hosted by the Minister of Home Affairs. This discrepancies sometimes undermine the issues of credibility of the voters turnout, undermine the credibility of the voters roll that we do have. So coming to the question, of course, we have realized that there was quite a very poor turnout of the young people towards these elections. And part of the reason, I think, which contributed to such a poor turnout of the young people towards this election, it is because there is no much activity, or there was no much mobilization that was specifically done with or targeted the young people to realize the significance of taking part in these elections. However, of course, we have also noted some of the young people taking advantage of contesting for these elections in some of the constituencies or some of the electoral divisions. So we actually have a mixed picture in terms of how the young people have participated in these elections. But generally, the young people have not participated much in this recent election that we had.
Oh, thank you so much for speaking to us. Just reflecting on the upcoming Lesotho elections, Tsikoane Peshoane, thank you so much for your time. So just looking towards some of the preparations and compliance.